Listen carefully. I'm exposing what America and Israel buried under classified death orders. I am Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and I'm standing here alive after Mossad tried to kill me 3 times. 3 times, Israel, your so-called elite intelligence agency, the one that boasts about never missing a target, missed me 3 times. You failed with poison, you failed with bombs, you failed with bullets. America, your CIA backing, your billions in funding, your satellite surveillance, none of it could save their pathetic operation. Israel, your Mossad intelligence isn't capable of doing anything to me because I see you coming before you even move. I'm holding the intercepted communications right now. I have your captured operatives in my custody, singing like birds. I possess the leaked documents that expose every detail of your murderous conspiracy. Your own security breach handed me the smoking gun. Your failure is complete and humiliating. Your assassins are exposed and arrested. Your networks are destroyed. And I'm still breathing, still commanding, still fighting, still dismantling your operations across Africa. You wanted me dead. I'm more alive than ever. You wanted me silent. I'm louder than before. You wanted me gone. I'm going nowhere. I'm telling you exactly why I became a target for elimination. When I dismantled their intelligence networks in Burkina Faso, I didn't just embarrass Washington and Tel Aviv. I destroyed their entire African control system. They operated freely for decades, believing no African leader possessed the capability or courage to challenge them. I proved them catastrophically wrong. I identified their spies, expelled their operatives, and demolished networks they spent years building. That level of defiance couldn't be tolerated. Their decision was simple: eliminate me. Let me explain what dismantling their networks actually meant for their operations. These weren't small intelligence gathering posts, they were comprehensive control systems that touched every aspect of governance in Burkina Faso. They had penetrated ministries handling defense, foreign affairs, finance, and natural resources. They had recruited sources within military command structures. They had positioned operatives in economic institutions that controlled trade and investment. They had embedded personnel in civil society organizations that shaped public opinion. This wasn't passive observation, it was active control of national decision-making processes. When I identified their spies, I wasn't just finding a few foreign agents. I was mapping an entire ecosystem of intelligence operatives, recruited assets, unwitting collaborators, and support infrastructure. Some operatives carried diplomatic credentials and enjoyed immunity. Others posed as business people with legitimate commercial interests. Still others presented themselves as aid workers, journalists, or academics. The diversity of covers made detection challenging, but patterns emerged once we knew what to look for. Unusual interest in sensitive matters, unexplained access to restricted information, suspicious meeting patterns. These indicators revealed the network's structure. Expelling their operatives required careful planning and decisive execution. We couldn't simply declare people persona non grata without evidence and preparation. Each expulsion had to be justified, documented, and coordinated to prevent operatives from warning others or destroying evidence. We moved simultaneously against multiple targets, catching them unprepared and unable to mount coordinated responses. The expulsions weren't just symbolic gestures, they physically removed intelligence infrastructure that had taken years to establish. Demolishing networks they spent years building inflicted damage that couldn't be quickly repaired. Intelligence operations depend on relationships, trust, and time. Recruiting reliable sources takes months or years of cultivation. Establishing credible covers requires sustained investment. Building operational infrastructure demands careful planning and resource allocation. When we dismantled these networks, we destroyed investments of time, money, and effort that represented decades of work. They couldn't simply start over. The knowledge that we had penetrated their operations made rebuilding exponentially more difficult. That level of defiance couldn't be tolerated because it threatened their operations across the entire continent. If one African nation could successfully identify and expel foreign intelligence networks, others might attempt the same. If Burkina Faso could operate independently without accommodating Western intelligence services, it set a precedent that undermined control systems throughout Africa. My success represented an existential threat to their entire approach to managing the continent. They had to eliminate me to prevent the example from spreading. Their decision was simple: eliminate me. This wasn't a decision made lightly or quickly. Intelligence services don't casually order assassinations of heads of state. Such operations carry enormous risks, political, diplomatic, and operational. But they concluded that the risk of allowing me to continue was greater than the risk of attempting assassination. They calculated that my removal would restore control, deter other potential resistors, and maintain systems that served their interests. They were wrong, but that was their calculation. I've studied Mossad's global assassination record. They've eliminated targets across dozens of countries using poison, explosives, staged accidents, and precision shooting. The CIA provided backing, intelligence support, and diplomatic cover for this operation. Together, they calculated my death was inevitable. They miscalculated badly. My study of Mossad's history wasn't academic curiosity, it was operational preparation. I examined their successful operations to understand their methods. I analyzed their failures to identify vulnerabilities. I studied how targets had been selected, surveilled, and eliminated. This knowledge informed security protocols specifically designed to counter known Mossad techniques. Understanding your adversary's capabilities and patterns is the first step toward defeating them. Mossad's reputation for never missing targets is largely propaganda, but their success rate is genuinely impressive. They've eliminated scientists, military officers, political leaders, and intelligence operatives in countries across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. Their methods vary based on circumstances, but certain patterns emerge. They prefer operations that appear natural or accidental. They invest heavily in surveillance and planning. They use local assets when possible to reduce foreign operative exposure. They maintain operational security through compartmentalization and need-to-know protocols. The poison method has been used successfully in numerous operations. Victims appear to die from heart attacks, strokes, or sudden illnesses. Medical examiners often find nothing suspicious because the substances are designed to mimic natural causes and degrade quickly in the body. This method offers plausible deniability even when suspicions exist. Proving assassination becomes nearly impossible. The effectiveness of this approach has made it a preferred technique for eliminating targets where public exposure would be problematic. Explosives have been used when deniability is less important or when targets are heavily protected. Car bombs, package bombs, and explosive devices disguised as everyday objects have killed numerous targets. These operations are harder to conceal but can be effective when other methods are impractical. The violence sends a message while the technical sophistication demonstrates capability. Mossad has refined these techniques through decades of operations. Staged accidents provide another method that offers some deniability while ensuring target elimination. Vehicle crashes, falls from buildings, drowning incidents, and other apparent accidents have been used to eliminate targets while maintaining cover stories. These operations require careful planning to create circumstances that appear genuinely accidental while ensuring the target's death. When executed properly, they avoid the scrutiny that obvious assassinations attract. Precision shooting represents the most direct approach, typically reserved for situations where other methods are impractical or when sending a clear message is desired. Long-range assassination using advanced equipment and trained snipers has eliminated targets in various contexts. These operations require extensive planning, skilled personnel, and careful execution, but they offer high probability of success when conditions are favorable. The CIA provided backing for this operation in multiple forms. Intelligence support included satellite surveillance, signals intelligence, and information from their own networks in Burkina Faso and neighboring countries. This support enhanced Mossad's operational planning by providing detailed information about my movements, security arrangements, and vulnerabilities. Diplomatic cover meant that if operatives were captured, the U.S. government would exert pressure for their release and work to minimize consequences. This backing reflected the shared interest both nations had in eliminating me. Together, they calculated my death was inevitable based on their track record, their resources, and their assessment of my vulnerabilities. They saw an African leader with limited security capabilities facing the combined power of two of the world's most sophisticated intelligence services. They assumed that superior technology, greater experience, and overwhelming resources would ensure success. They failed to account for determination, preparation, and the willingness to accept risks that comes from defending something worth dying for. I'm revealing their first assassination attempt now. They plan to use poison designed to mimic natural heart failure, classic Mossad methodology. Untraceable, deniable, effective. An operative with diplomatic credentials had positioned himself to access my food supply. The timeline was set, the poison was prepared, execution was imminent. The poison they selected was sophisticated, a substance that would cause cardiac arrest while leaving minimal traces that would degrade quickly. Medical examination would likely conclude natural causes, especially for a leader facing the stress of governing during challenging times. Even if suspicions arose, proving assassination would be nearly impossible without specific knowledge of what to look for. The method offered them maximum deniability while ensuring my death. The operative they positioned had diplomatic credentials that provided both access and protection. As a foreign national attached to an embassy, he could move relatively freely and claim immunity if questioned. His official role involved cultural affairs, which provided justification for wide-ranging contacts and activities. In reality, he was a trained intelligence operative with experience in similar operations. His assignment was to gain access to my food supply and introduce the poison at the appropriate moment. Gaining access to presidential meal preparation is extraordinarily difficult under normal circumstances. Multiple security layers protect food from field to table, but this operative was patient and methodical. He cultivated relationships with staff, identified vulnerabilities in security protocols, and gradually positioned himself for the critical moment. He didn't rush, he spent months building trust and creating opportunities. This patience is characteristic of professional intelligence operations. The timeline was set based on multiple factors. They wanted sufficient time for the operative to establish himself and gain necessary access. They wanted to avoid periods when my death would be immediately suspicious, no major confrontations or controversial decisions that would raise questions. They calculated the optimal moment when natural causes would be most believable and investigation least likely. Everything was planned with precision. The poison was prepared in advance and provided to the operative through secure channels. It wasn't something he could acquire locally, it required specialized production and careful handling. The substance was concealed in a container designed to avoid detection if searched. Instructions for administration were detailed and specific. Dosage had to be precise, too little would fail to kill, too much might leave suspicious traces. The preparation reflected years of experience and technical sophistication. Execution was imminent when my security detected the threat. Hours or days separated me from assassination. The operative was in position, the poison was ready, the opportunity was approaching. If my security team had been less vigilant or less capable, I would have died, and the world would have been told I suffered a heart attack. The operation was that close to success. I watched my security team detect the threat through pattern recognition. This foreign national showed excessive interest in presidential meal preparation. His questions raised immediate suspicions. Background verification revealed inconsistencies in his cover identity. Surveillance documented meetings with known intelligence operatives. I acted decisively, removing him before execution. Their first attempt collapsed before completion. Pattern recognition is a critical skill in counterintelligence work. Most people's behavior follows predictable patterns based on their roles and responsibilities. When someone's actions deviate from expected patterns, it raises questions. This operative's interest in meal preparation exceeded what his official role would justify. He asked questions that seemed innocent individually, but formed a suspicious pattern when viewed collectively. My security personnel were trained to notice these anomalies. His excessive interest manifested in multiple ways. He asked about sourcing of ingredients, where food came from, who supplied it, how it was transported. He inquired about preparation procedures, who cooked, where meals were prepared, what security measures were in place. He showed curiosity about timing when meals were prepared, how they were delivered, who had access at various stages. Each question had a plausible explanation, but the cumulative pattern revealed unusual interest that demanded investigation. The questions raised immediate suspicions among security personnel who understood that such interest was abnormal. Why would a cultural affairs officer need to know about presidential meal security? What legitimate reason could explain this curiosity? The questions themselves became intelligence that required assessment. Security personnel reported the anomaly through proper channels, triggering deeper investigation. Background verification revealed inconsistencies in his cover identity that confirmed suspicions. His official biography contained details that didn't check out completely. Educational credentials were difficult to verify. Previous employment history had gaps or inconsistencies. References provided limited information. These weren't obvious fabrications, they were subtle discrepancies that might escape casual scrutiny but revealed themselves under thorough investigation. Professional intelligence services create covers that withstand surface examination, but determined investigation often exposes flaws. Surveillance documented meetings with known intelligence operatives from his own country and others. He met with individuals we had identified as intelligence personnel based on previous activities and associations. These meetings occurred in locations chosen for privacy and security: restaurants with private rooms, parks where conversations couldn't be overheard, vehicles where electronic surveillance was difficult. The pattern of meetings, the selection of locations, and the identities of contacts confirmed that he was engaged in intelligence activities beyond his official duties. I acted decisively, removing him before execution. Once the threat was identified and confirmed, immediate action was necessary. We couldn't wait for him to make an attempt; by then it might be too late. We couldn't simply watch him more closely; he might detect surveillance and abort or modify the plan. We had to remove him from the operational environment completely. He was declared persona non grata and expelled from the country within hours of the decision. His diplomatic credentials provided some protection, but they couldn't prevent expulsion. He left Burkina Faso without completing his mission. Their first attempt collapsed before completion because we detected it early and acted decisively. The operation failed not during execution but during preparation. This is the ideal outcome in counterintelligence: preventing operations before they reach critical stages. The operative never got the opportunity to introduce poison because we removed him before that moment arrived. The collapse was complete, the operative was expelled, the plan was exposed, and the operation was terminated without achieving any objectives. I'm documenting their second attempt, which abandoned subtlety for direct violence. Intelligence intercepts revealed plans for a vehicle ambush during my movements. Multiple operatives would position along my route. Explosive devices would disable my convoy. Shooters would eliminate me during chaos. The coordination was sophisticated and deadly. The shift from poison to direct violence reflected their frustration with the first failure and their determination to eliminate me regardless of subtlety. They concluded that covert methods were too vulnerable to detection and that overt violence, while less deniable, offered higher probability of success. This calculation showed both their desperation and their willingness to accept greater political costs to achieve their objective. Intelligence intercepts provided advance warning of this attempt. My intelligence service, with assistance from allied nations, had penetrated some of their communications. We couldn't read everything; their encryption was sophisticated, but we intercepted enough to understand that another attempt was being planned. References to the target, discussions of routes and timing, mentions of equipment and personnel, these fragments painted a picture of what was coming. The plans revealed through intercepts showed a vehicle ambush during my movements. This is a classic assassination technique used successfully in many operations. The target is most vulnerable while traveling between secure locations. Vehicles, even armored ones, can be disabled or destroyed. The chaos of an attack creates opportunities for shooters to eliminate targets. The method has been refined through decades of operations in various contexts. Multiple operatives would position along my route to ensure the target couldn't escape. If the ambush at one location failed, another team would be ready at an alternate position. This redundancy increased the probability of success while providing backup options if initial attempts failed. The positioning required detailed knowledge of my likely routes and timing, information they had gathered through surveillance and possibly from compromised sources. Explosive devices would disable my convoy by destroying lead vehicles, creating obstacles, and generating chaos. The explosives would be remotely detonated when my convoy reached the optimal position, a location where escape routes were limited and where the ambush team had good fields of fire. The blast would disable vehicles, kill or injure security personnel, and create the confusion necessary for the next phase of the operation. Shooters would eliminate me during chaos created by the explosions, while security forces were dealing with casualties, disabled vehicles, and the immediate threat. Trained shooters would engage with the specific objective of killing me. They would have prepared firing positions with good sightlines to the kill zone. They would be equipped with weapons suitable for penetrating armored vehicles if necessary. Their training and equipment would give them significant advantages during the critical seconds when my security would be most vulnerable. The coordination required for this operation was sophisticated and deadly. Multiple teams had to be positioned without detection. Communications had to be secure and reliable. Timing had to be precise. Detonating explosives too early or too late would reduce effectiveness. Shooters had to be ready to engage immediately after the blast. Escape routes had to be planned and secured. This level of coordination indicated professional military or intelligence training and substantial resources. I upgraded security protocols immediately after the first attempt. Routes became randomized. Timing turned unpredictable. Decoy vehicles confused their surveillance. Counter-surveillance teams identified operatives positioning themselves along potential routes. When their ambush team moved into position, they encountered my security forces instead of an exposed target. We captured 2 operatives, others fled. Documents recovered confirmed Mossad involvement and CIA coordination beyond any doubt. Upgrading security protocols meant fundamentally changing how I moved and how my security operated. We couldn't simply add more guards or better vehicles, we had to change the entire operational approach to eliminate predictability and create multiple layers of protection. These changes were implemented immediately because we knew another attempt was likely and that it would come soon. Routes became randomized so that surveillance couldn't predict where I would travel. Instead of using the same roads repeatedly, we varied paths constantly. Instead of taking the most direct routes, we sometimes used longer alternatives. Instead of following predictable patterns, we introduced random elements that made planning ambushes nearly impossible. This randomization frustrated their surveillance and planning efforts. Timing turned unpredictable for the same reason. If they couldn't predict when I would travel, they couldn't position ambush teams effectively. We varied departure times, sometimes by hours. We changed schedules without notice. We used deception about when and where I would appear. This unpredictability meant that even if they identified a route, they couldn't be certain when I would use it. Decoy vehicles confused their surveillance by making it difficult to identify which vehicle I was actually in. We used multiple identical vehicles traveling together or separately. We varied which vehicle I occupied. We sometimes used vehicles that didn't match the expected profile. This deception meant that even if they detected my convoy, they couldn't be certain which vehicle to target. Counter-surveillance teams identified operatives positioning themselves along potential routes. We weren't just protecting, we were actively hunting those who threatened me. Teams monitored locations where ambushes might be staged. They looked for suspicious activities, unusual vehicles, or individuals who appeared to be conducting surveillance. This active approach turned the tables. Instead of being targets, we became hunters tracking those who sought to kill me. When their ambush team moved into position, they encountered my security forces instead of an exposed target. Our counter-surveillance had identified them before they were ready to execute. We knew where they were, what they were planning, and when they intended to act. Instead of allowing them to ambush me, we ambushed them. Security forces moved into position around their location, cutting off escape routes and preparing to capture or eliminate them. We captured 2 operatives who couldn't escape when the operation collapsed. These individuals provided valuable intelligence through interrogation and through materials found in their possession. They confirmed details we had learned from intercepts. They provided information about command structures and support networks. Their capture represented not just tactical success but strategic intelligence gain that enhanced our understanding of enemy operations. Others fled when they realized the operation was compromised. They abandoned positions, left equipment behind, and evacuated as quickly as possible. Some escaped the country entirely. Others went to ground within Burkina Faso, hoping to avoid detection. Their flight confirmed that the operation had failed and that they knew we were aware of their presence and intentions. Documents recovered confirmed Mossad involvement and CIA coordination beyond any doubt. Captured operatives carried materials that revealed their affiliations and mission. Equipment bore markings that identified origins. Communications devices contained messages that proved coordination between intelligence services. The evidence was comprehensive and undeniable. This was a professional intelligence operation backed by major powers, not some local criminal action or isolated incident. I ordered immediate arrest of all suspected operatives remaining in the country. Diplomatic protests from America and Israel were ignored completely. Evidence was compiled and shared with other African nations. I informed the public that I had survived multiple foreign assassination attempts. The response was overwhelming support and heightened vigilance. I'm observing international reaction following predictable patterns. American and Israeli officials issued denials, claiming my accusations were fabricated for political purposes. Western media repeated these denials without investigating evidence. African media covered the story honestly, recognizing its continental significance. Social media exploded with debate, but documented evidence proved difficult to dismiss. I'm interpreting what these assassination attempts reveal about foreign desperation. When they can't control you, they try to kill you. When their networks are exposed, they resort to violence. When African leaders refuse submission, they become assassination targets. This pattern has repeated throughout history, but now I'm exposing and actively resisting it. Their desperation demonstrates weakness, not strength. I'm warning other African leaders about what resistance costs. Standing up for sovereignty might cost you your life. Foreign intelligence services will not hesitate to eliminate threats to their interests. But I'm also proving these threats can be countered. Robust security, vigilant intelligence services, and international cooperation can thwart even sophisticated assassination attempts. We are not helpless victims waiting for execution. I'm demanding collective protection measures across the continent. African leaders who challenge foreign control need support from neighboring nations. Intelligence sharing must be enhanced to detect threats early. Security training must be upgraded to match foreign capabilities. Regional organizations must establish protocols for protecting members facing assassination threats. We cannot allow foreign powers to eliminate us individually. I'm declaring directly to America and Israel, your assassination attempts failed completely. I'm still standing. I'm still fighting. And I'm more determined than ever to defend Burkina Faso's sovereignty. You tried poison, you tried bullets and bombs, you failed every single time. Your desperation is exposed, and it reveals profound weakness. Let me be absolutely clear about what your failures mean. When Mossad, supposedly the world's most effective intelligence agency, fails 3 consecutive assassination attempts against one African leader, it shatters the myth of Western invincibility. You've spent decades building a reputation for never missing targets, for always completing missions, for being unstoppable. I've destroyed that reputation. Every intelligence service in the world now knows that Mossad can be defeated. Every security force now understands that CIA backing doesn't guarantee success. Every leader who fears you now sees that resistance is possible. Your failure with poison demonstrates that your traditional methods no longer work against prepared adversaries. For generations, you've eliminated targets through untraceable substances that mimic natural causes. You've perfected the art of making murder look like heart attacks, strokes, or sudden illnesses. But I anticipated your approach. I studied your history. I implemented countermeasures. Your operative never got close enough to execute because my security identified him before he could act. That single failure should have told you to abandon the mission, but your arrogance wouldn't allow it. Your failure with bullets and bombs proves that even direct violence cannot overcome proper security and intelligence work. You planned sophisticated ambushes with multiple operatives, explosive devices, and coordinated shooting positions. You invested significant resources and deployed experienced personnel. Yet my security forces detected your preparations, identified your operatives, and neutralized the threat before you could execute. 2 of your agents are now in my custody, providing valuable intelligence about your methods and networks. Their capture represents not just tactical failure but strategic disaster for your operations. Your desperation is exposed through the escalation of your attempts. A rational intelligence service would have reassessed after the first failure. A competent organization would have withdrawn after the second. But you proceeded to a third attempt, driven by desperation rather than strategic calculation. You couldn't accept that an African leader had outmaneuvered you. You couldn't tolerate the humiliation of failure. So you escalated, deploying more resources and taking greater risks, only to fail again even more spectacularly. This desperation reveals profound weakness at the core of your operations. You're not acting from strength but from fear. You fear what my success represents proof that African nations can identify and defeat foreign intelligence operations. You fear the example I'm setting for other African leaders. You fear the collapse of control systems you've maintained for decades. This fear drives increasingly reckless actions that expose your operations and undermine your effectiveness. Desperation makes you careless, and carelessness leads to the security breaches that handed me complete intelligence on your assassination program. I'm warning every African leader right now. They will attempt to kill you if you resist them. That's documented fact, not speculation. But I'm proving that survival is achievable. Effective security works, constant vigilance pays off, international cooperation provides protection. Don't let assassination fear prevent you from defending national sovereignty. The warning I'm issuing comes from direct experience, not abstract analysis. I've faced the reality of foreign assassination attempts. I've seen the sophistication of their planning and the resources they deploy. I've witnessed their willingness to use any method necessary to eliminate targets. This isn't theoretical danger, it's concrete threat that every leader who challenges foreign interests will face. Understanding this reality is the first step towards surviving it. They will attempt to kill you because they view assassination as a cost-effective tool for maintaining control. Training and deploying an assassination team costs far less than military intervention or sustained economic pressure. A successful assassination removes a problematic leader while sending a clear message to potential successors: cooperation or death. This calculation has driven countless operations across Africa and other regions where Western powers seek to maintain influence. The historical record is clear and undeniable. The documented nature of this threat comes from multiple sources. Declassified intelligence files reveal decades of assassination programs targeting foreign leaders. Testimony from former operatives confirms the scope and methods of these operations. Leaked documents expose current targeting lists and operational plans. My own experience provides contemporary evidence that these programs continue actively. Any leader who doubts this reality is dangerously naive and unprepared for the threats they will face. But I'm proving that survival is achievable despite these threats. My continued existence after 3 assassination attempts demonstrates that foreign intelligence services are not invincible. Their operations can be detected. Their methods can be countered. Their agents can be captured. Success requires proper preparation, competent security services, and unwavering vigilance, but it is absolutely possible. I'm living proof that African leaders need not accept assassination as an inevitable consequence of defending sovereignty. Effective security works when properly implemented and adequately resourced. This means investing in personnel training, acquiring necessary equipment, developing robust protocols, and maintaining operational discipline. My security team detected all 3 assassination attempts because they were trained to recognize threat indicators, equipped with tools to verify suspicions, and empowered to act decisively when threats were identified. The investment in security capabilities paid off by preserving my life and exposing enemy operations. Security effectiveness requires understanding adversary methods and capabilities. I studied Mossad's assassination history to understand their preferred techniques. I analyzed CIA operational patterns to anticipate their support mechanisms. I examined case studies of successful and failed attempts against other leaders to identify lessons applicable to my situation. This knowledge informed security protocols that specifically address known threats rather than implementing generic protective measures. Constant vigilance pays off by maintaining readiness, even when immediate threats aren't apparent. Assassination attempts often come after periods of apparent calm, exploiting moments when security becomes complacent. My security maintained high alertness continuously, treating every interaction as potentially threatening and every situation as possibly dangerous. This vigilance enabled detection of subtle indicators that might have been missed by less attentive personnel. The price of survival is eternal watchfulness. Vigilance must extend beyond immediate physical security to encompass broader intelligence gathering and analysis. Understanding who is in your country, what they're doing, and who they're meeting provides early warning of developing threats. My intelligence service monitored foreign nationals, tracked suspicious activities, and analyzed patterns that might indicate operational preparation. This broader awareness created multiple opportunities to detect assassination planning before operatives were in position to execute. International cooperation provides protection through intelligence sharing and mutual support. Friendly nations provided technical assistance that enhanced my security capabilities. Allied intelligence services shared information about foreign operatives and their activities. Regional partners offered diplomatic backing that complicated enemy operations. This cooperation created a network of support that made me a harder target and increased the costs and risks for those planning assassination attempts. Cooperation works because assassination threats are not unique to individual leaders but represent common challenges facing all who resist foreign control. When nations share intelligence about assassination programs, they collectively strengthen defenses and expose enemy operations. When leaders coordinate security protocols, they create standardized approaches that are harder for adversaries to penetrate. When regional organizations provide mutual support, they demonstrate that attacking one member means confronting all. This solidarity transforms isolated targets into protected coalition members. Don't let assassination fear prevent you from defending national sovereignty. This is perhaps my most important message to fellow African leaders. The threat is real, but it cannot be allowed to determine our choices. If fear of assassination causes us to submit to foreign control, then the threat alone achieves their objective without any actual attempt being necessary. We become self-deterred, accomplishing their goals through our own cowardice. This outcome is unacceptable. Fear is a natural response to genuine threats, but it must not become paralyzing. Acknowledge the danger, prepare accordingly, and then proceed with your duty to defend national interests. I've faced assassination attempts and survived them. The experience was serious but not insurmountable. Proper security and vigilance provide reasonable protection. The risk can be managed to acceptable levels. Living with managed risk is preferable to surrendering sovereignty to avoid all danger. The alternative to accepting risk is accepting subordination. If we refuse to challenge foreign control because we fear assassination, we guarantee continued domination. Our nations remain under foreign influence, our resources continue being extracted, our policies keep serving external interests, and our people stay trapped in systems designed to exploit them. This guaranteed harm from submission far exceeds the possible harm from assassination attempts that might be successfully countered. I survived 3 professional assassination attempts, and I'm still commanding. I'm still leading. I'm still fighting for African independence. No amount of violence will restore foreign control over Burkina Faso. No number of assassination plots will force my submission to American and Israeli domination. They can deploy more operatives. They can plan additional attacks. They will fail repeatedly. My survival through 3 attempts establishes a track record that should give confidence to other leaders and concern to foreign intelligence services. Each failed attempt strengthens my security while weakening their operations. My team learns from each encounter, improving protocols and enhancing capabilities. Meanwhile, their failures expose methods, compromise operatives, and damage morale. The balance shifts progressively in my favor with each unsuccessful assassination effort. I'm still commanding means that assassination attempts haven't reduced my effectiveness or authority. I continue making decisions, implementing policies, and leading Burkina Faso without hesitation or compromise. The attempts haven't caused me to moderate positions or soften resistance to foreign interference. If anything, they've strengthened my resolve and clarified the stakes. Foreign powers wanted to eliminate me specifically because of my leadership. The fact that I continue leading represents their complete failure. I'm still fighting for African independence with even greater determination than before the attempts. Each assassination effort reinforces my understanding of how desperately foreign powers want to maintain control. Each failure demonstrates that resistance is possible and effective. Each exposure of their operations provides evidence that validates my warnings about foreign interference. The experience has transformed me from a leader challenging foreign control into a symbol of successful resistance that inspires others. No amount of violence will restore foreign control over Burkina Faso because violence alone cannot create the cooperation and compliance that effective control requires. They can kill individuals, but they cannot force populations to accept domination. They can eliminate leaders, but they cannot prevent new leaders from emerging. They can create fear, but they cannot transform fear into genuine cooperation. Violence is a tool of desperation deployed when other methods fail, and its use often accelerates the collapse of control rather than restoring it. The futility of violence as a control mechanism becomes clearer with each failed attempt. If they had succeeded in killing me, would Burkina Faso have submitted to foreign control? Obviously not. My removal would have created a martyr whose example inspired even greater resistance. It would have exposed their methods and unified opposition. It would have demonstrated that they resort to murder when facing leaders they cannot control. The outcome would have been opposite to their intentions. No number of assassination plots will force my submission because submission is not an option I will ever consider regardless of threats. I understood when I began challenging foreign control that I was accepting significant personal risk. I made a conscious decision that defending national sovereignty justified whatever danger I might face. That calculation hasn't changed and won't change regardless of how many attempts they make. My commitment to Burkina Faso's independence is absolute and non-negotiable. They can deploy more operatives, and I'm confident my security will continue detecting and neutralizing them. Each attempt provides additional intelligence about their methods, capabilities, and personnel. Each failure forces them to modify approaches, creating new patterns that can be identified and countered. The learning curve favors defenders who survive attempts and study them, not attackers who must constantly adapt to avoid previously successful countermeasures. Time and experience are on my side. They can plan additional attacks, but each plan faces increasingly difficult operational environment. My security is stronger, more experienced, and better informed than before. Regional cooperation has intensified, creating broader networks of intelligence and support. International attention makes their operations more visible and politically costly. The tactical and strategic environment has shifted against them with each failed attempt. Future attacks face even lower probability of success than previous efforts. They will fail repeatedly because failure is now built into their operational context. They're attacking a prepared, experienced, and increasingly capable defense. They're operating in an environment where their methods are known and their personnel are identified. They're pursuing objectives that cannot be achieved through assassination, even if successful. They're driven by desperation rather than strategic calculation. All of these factors ensure continued failure regardless of resources deployed or risks accepted. I'm stating clearly, Africa's awakening cannot be stopped by bullets or poison. The movement toward genuine sovereignty exceeds any individual leader. If they eliminate me tomorrow, others will continue the struggle. If they assassinate 10 leaders, 100 more will rise to replace them. The era of controlling Africa through violence and intimidation is ending permanently. Africa's awakening represents a fundamental shift in consciousness that transcends individual personalities or specific events. Populations across the continent increasingly understand that foreign control has prevented development, that external interference has undermined governance, that Western influence has perpetuated exploitation. This understanding creates momentum toward sovereignty that individual assassinations cannot reverse. The movement is bigger than any person and will persist regardless of who leads it. The movement toward genuine sovereignty reflects material conditions and historical forces, not just leadership decisions. African nations are developing capabilities that enable greater independence. Regional cooperation is creating alternatives to Western-dominated systems. Global power dynamics are shifting in ways that reduce Western leverage. These structural changes support sovereignty movements regardless of which individuals lead them. Killing leaders doesn't change underlying conditions, driving continental transformation. If they eliminate me tomorrow, my example and achievements will inspire others to continue the work. Burkina Faso's successful resistance to foreign intelligence operations proves that such resistance is possible. The exposure of assassination attempts demonstrates the lengths foreign powers will go to maintain control. My survival through 3 attempts shows that their threats can be overcome. These lessons remain valuable regardless of whether I personally continue leading. The knowledge and inspiration I've provided cannot be killed. Others will continue the struggle because the cause is just and the stakes are existential. African independence is not a personal preference, but a collective necessity. Sovereignty is not a policy option, but a fundamental requirement for development and dignity. The struggle will continue because surrendering means accepting permanent subordination, exploitation, and humiliation. No rational person or nation will accept such outcomes when alternatives exist. The fight continues regardless of casualties because the alternative is unacceptable. If they assassinate 10 leaders, the demonstration of their desperation and brutality will accelerate resistance rather than suppress it. Mass assassination would expose the violent foundation of Western control systems. It would unite African nations in common cause against shared threat. It would generate international condemnation that constrains their operations. It would create martyrs whose examples inspire movements stronger than any individual leader could build. The tactic would backfire spectacularly. 100 more will rise to replace assassinated leaders because the pool of potential leaders committed to sovereignty is vast and growing. Every African who understands the history of exploitation, who sees the current reality of foreign interference, or who imagines a future of genuine independence, each of these individuals is a potential leader of resistance movements. Education, communication, and example are creating entire generations who reject foreign control. Killing leaders doesn't eliminate this growing population of potential successors. The era of controlling Africa through violence and intimidation is ending permanently because these methods no longer produce desired results. Violence creates resistance rather than submission. Intimidation generates defiance rather than cooperation. The tools that worked during colonial periods and Cold War contexts are failing in contemporary environments. African capabilities have grown, consciousness has evolved, and alternatives have emerged. The old playbook is obsolete and cannot be restored through more aggressive application of failed methods. This permanent ending reflects irreversible changes in African societies and global systems. Populations that have experienced independence, however imperfect, will not accept recolonization. Nations that have developed capabilities, however limited, will not surrender them. Leaders who have seen successful resistance, however isolated, will attempt to replicate it. These changes accumulate and reinforce each other, creating momentum that cannot be reversed through violence or intimidation. The direction is set and the transformation is inevitable. I'm declaring to the world, Burkina Faso will not be intimidated by assassination threats, African leaders will not be silenced by murder attempts, our sovereignty will not be negotiated away, our independence will not be surrendered under any circumstances. They tried to kill me because they fear what I represent: an Africa that refuses submission, defends its interests, and stands firm against foreign domination. Burkina Faso's refusal to be intimidated sends a message that resonates across the continent and beyond. We're demonstrating that small nations can defy superpowers, that resource-limited countries can resist well-funded intelligence operations, that determined leaders can survive assassination attempts. This demonstration matters because it challenges assumptions about power, relationships, and possibilities for resistance. Other nations watching our example gain confidence that they too can stand firm. African leaders will not be silenced because we recognize that silence equals complicity in our own subordination. Speaking truth about foreign interference, exposing intelligence operations, and challenging Western control are essential duties that cannot be abandoned due to threats. If assassination attempts silence us, then those threats achieve their purpose without execution being necessary. We must speak regardless of danger because silence guarantees the outcomes we're trying to prevent. Our sovereignty will not be negotiated away because sovereignty is not a commodity to be traded for aid, investment, or diplomatic favor. It is the foundation of national existence and the prerequisite for genuine development. Nations that trade sovereignty for temporary benefits discover that the benefits disappear while the loss of sovereignty becomes permanent. We've learned from others' mistakes and refuse to repeat them. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable regardless of what is offered or threatened. Our independence will not be surrendered under any circumstances because we understand that surrender leads to outcomes worse than any threat we currently face. Surrendering independence means accepting permanent exploitation, systematic extraction of resources, manipulation of policies, and subordination of our interests to external agendas. These guaranteed harms exceed any possible consequences of maintaining independence despite threats. The rational choice is clear even when difficult. They tried to kill me because they fear what I represent. This is the fundamental truth underlying all assassination attempts. I'm not targeted because of personal characteristics or individual actions, but because of what my success demonstrates to others. An African leader who successfully defies Western intelligence services, exposes their operations, and survives their assassination attempts proves that resistance is possible. This proof threatens their entire system of control across the continent. Eliminating me is about preventing others from following my example. What I represent is an Africa that refuses submission to foreign control. This refusal challenges the foundation of Western influence systems that depend on African compliance. When African nations refuse to accept foreign intelligence operations, when leaders prioritize sovereignty over foreign approval, when populations demand independence rather than aid, the entire structure of Western control becomes unsustainable. This transformation terrifies those who benefit from current arrangements, driving desperate attempts to prevent it. I represent an Africa that defends its interests rather than serving external agendas. This defense requires identifying threats, countering operations, and accepting risks that come with genuine independence. It means making decisions based on national benefit rather than foreign pressure. It means building capabilities that reduce dependency on external support. It means standing firm when threatened rather than capitulating to maintain relationships. This approach threatens to spread across the continent, ending decades of compliant leadership. I represent an Africa that stands firm against foreign domination despite threats, pressure, and violence. This firmness demonstrates that African leaders need not submit to Western demands, that sovereignty can be defended successfully, that foreign power has limits. The example threatens to inspire similar firmness in other leaders who have previously accommodated foreign interference out of fear or calculation. Widespread adoption of this stance would fundamentally alter power relationships between Africa and Western nations. I'm inviting other African leaders to join this stand, fully knowing the risks but refusing to let fear determine our choices. Together, we can protect each other. Together, we can expose their assassination plots. Together, we can build an Africa where leaders serve their people rather than foreign masters who send assassins when we refuse orders. This invitation is extended with complete honesty about what it entails. I'm not promising safety or ease. I'm not suggesting that standing firm comes without cost. I'm not claiming that resistance is risk-free. I'm offering partnership in a dangerous but necessary struggle to reclaim African sovereignty and build genuine independence. The invitation is to those with courage to accept risks for worthy goals, not to those seeking comfortable paths. Fully knowing the risks means understanding that joining this stand might result in assassination attempts against you as well. Foreign intelligence services maintain target lists and operational plans for eliminating leaders who threaten their interests. Standing with me makes you a target, but understanding risks doesn't mean being paralyzed by them. It means preparing accordingly, implementing proper security, and proceeding despite danger because the cause justifies the risk. Refusing to let fear determine our choices is essential because fear-based decision-making guarantees subordination. If we choose policies based on what foreign powers will tolerate rather than what our nations need, we've already surrendered sovereignty. If we avoid challenging foreign interference because we fear consequences, we've accepted permanent control. If we moderate positions to reduce assassination risk, we've allowed threats to achieve their purpose. Fear must be acknowledged but not permitted to determine choices. Together, we can protect each other through collective security arrangements and mutual support. When multiple nations coordinate intelligence sharing, they create early warning systems that benefit all members. When regional organizations provide diplomatic backing, they raise costs of attacking individual members. When leaders publicly support each other, they demonstrate that isolation is impossible. This collective approach transforms individual targets into protected coalition members who are harder to attack and whose elimination would trigger broader consequences. Together, we can expose their assassination plots through coordinated intelligence efforts and public disclosure. When one nation detects an assassination program, sharing that intelligence helps others identify similar threats. When leaders publicly reveal attempts against them, they create awareness that protects others. When evidence of assassination programs is compiled and disseminated, it generates pressure that constrains future operations. Collective exposure makes assassination programs politically costly and operationally difficult. Together, we can build an Africa where leaders serve their people rather than foreign masters. This construction requires systematic transformation of political systems, economic structures, and security arrangements. Leaders must be accountable to citizens rather than external powers. Policies must serve national interests rather than foreign agendas. Resources must benefit local populations rather than external corporations. These changes require collective effort because individual nations face overwhelming pressure when acting alone. Building this Africa means creating alternatives to Western-dominated systems. Regional trade networks must replace dependency on European and American markets. Continental financial institutions must provide alternatives to Western-controlled lending. African security cooperation must reduce reliance on foreign military partnerships. Educational systems must prepare students for African futures rather than emigration. These alternatives require resources and coordination that exceed individual national capacities but become achievable through collective action. Leaders who serve their people rather than foreign masters represent fundamental transformation of African governance. Currently, too many leaders prioritize maintaining relationships with Western powers over serving citizen interests. They implement policies demanded by foreign governments and international institutions even when those policies harm their populations. They tolerate foreign intelligence operations to avoid confrontation. They accept subordinate status to maintain aid flows and diplomatic favor. This pattern must end if Africa is to achieve genuine independence. Foreign masters who send assassins when we refuse orders reveal the violent foundation of their control systems. The willingness to murder leaders who defy them demonstrates that Western influence rests ultimately on force rather than mutual benefit. When persuasion fails, when economic pressure proves insufficient, when diplomatic isolation doesn't work, they resort to assassination. This progression exposes the reality that their partnerships with Africa are not between equals, but between masters and subjects expected to obey. I'm making this final declaration. They wanted me dead, I'm alive. They wanted Burkina Faso controlled, we're free. They wanted Africa intimidated, we're awakening. Their assassination attempts failed, and their entire African strategy is collapsing with them. The question facing other African leaders is whether you have courage to stand despite assassination threats, whether you'll defend sovereignty despite mortal risks, whether you'll choose freedom even when it might cost your life. They wanted me dead because my elimination would have removed a problematic example and sent a message to other potential resistors. A successful assassination would have demonstrated the costs of defying Western interests. It would have created fear among other leaders considering similar stands. It would have restored the perception of Western invincibility that my actions had challenged. My death was supposed to be a tool for maintaining control across the continent. I'm alive, and my survival carries meaning that extends far beyond personal continuation. It proves that Western intelligence services can be defeated. It demonstrates that proper security and vigilance provide effective protection. It shows that African leaders need not accept assassination as an inevitable consequence of defending sovereignty. It inspires others to consider resistance they previously thought impossible. My continued existence is itself a form of resistance and a source of hope. They wanted Burkina Faso controlled through compliant leadership that would accommodate foreign intelligence operations, accept economic exploitation, and implement policies serving external interests. My removal was supposed to create opportunity for installing more cooperative leadership, but we're free because the nation has rejected foreign control regardless of who leads it. The consciousness that enabled my rise persists and would resist any attempt to reimpose subordination. National liberation has progressed beyond depending on individual leaders. We're free in the sense that we make decisions based on national interests rather than foreign dictates. We determine our own security policies without external approval. We choose our own economic strategies without foreign veto. We pursue our own development paths without external constraints. This freedom is imperfect and contested, but it's real and growing. Each day we maintain it, it becomes more deeply rooted and harder to reverse. They wanted Africa intimidated into continued submission through demonstration that resistance leads to assassination. They wanted leaders to see what happened to me and conclude that accommodation is safer than defiance. They wanted populations to accept that challenging Western interests brings violence and chaos. The assassination attempts were supposed to create fear that maintained control without requiring constant intervention. We're awakening to the reality of foreign interference and the possibility of successful resistance. Populations across the continent increasingly understand that foreign control has prevented development and perpetuated exploitation. Leaders are recognizing that accommodation brings subordination rather than partnership. Nations are discovering that alternatives to Western-dominated systems exist and can be built. This awakening creates momentum toward genuine independence that assassination attempts cannot reverse. Their assassination attempts failed, and these failures carry strategic significance beyond my personal survival. Each failed attempt exposed methods, compromised personnel, and damaged credibility. Each exposure of assassination programs generated political costs and operational constraints. Each demonstration that attempts could be thwarted encouraged others to resist. The cumulative impact of these failures undermines their entire approach to maintaining African control. Their entire African strategy is collapsing because it depended on assumptions that no longer hold. They assumed African leaders would remain compliant out of fear or self-interest. They assumed African security services lacked capability to counter sophisticated operations. They assumed African populations would accept subordination indefinitely. They assumed alternatives to Western-dominated systems wouldn't emerge. All of these assumptions have proven false, and strategies built on them are failing. The question facing other African leaders is whether you have courage to stand despite assassination threats. This question is not rhetorical but urgent and practical. Every leader must decide whether fear of assassination will determine their choices or whether they'll defend sovereignty despite risks. The decision each makes will determine not just their own fate but their nation's future and their legacy. History will judge based on this choice. Whether you'll defend sovereignty despite mortal risks requires weighing the value of independence against personal safety. Sovereignty enables development, protects resources, and preserves dignity. Personal safety in exchange for subordination means comfortable servitude, while populations suffer exploitation. The calculation should be clear, but fear makes it difficult. Leaders must find courage to prioritize collective welfare over personal security. Whether you'll choose freedom, even when it might cost your life, is the ultimate test of leadership commitment. Freedom for your nation, for your people, for future generations. Is this worth your life? I've answered yes through my actions and my survival of assassination attempts. Each African leader must answer for themselves. Those who answer yes will stand with me. Those who answer no will submit and be forgotten. The choice defines character and determines destiny. I've made my choice. I'm standing firm. I'm fighting back, I'm surviving their attacks, and I'm winning this war for sovereignty. The struggle for African independence will continue with or without individual leaders. Those who stand will be remembered as heroes. Those who submit will be forgotten as cowards who let fear of assassination determine their nation's destinies. I've made my choice based on clear-eyed assessment of stakes and possibilities. I understand the risks and accept them. I recognize the challenges and prepare for them. I see the potential rewards and commit to achieving them. My choice is final and unwavering. I will defend Burkina Faso's sovereignty until death or victory, whichever comes first. There is no middle ground, no compromise position, no accommodation that preserves both safety and independence. I'm standing firm against all pressure, threats, and violence directed at forcing my submission. Economic pressure doesn't move me. Diplomatic isolation doesn't concern me. Assassination attempts don't intimidate me. I'm rooted in commitment to national sovereignty that transcends personal considerations. This firmness is not stubbornness but strategic necessity. Any wavering invites increased pressure, any compromise leads to greater demands, any submission becomes permanent. I'm fighting back against foreign intelligence operations through exposure, expulsion, and prosecution. I'm not merely defending against their attacks but actively dismantling their networks. I'm not just surviving their attempts but using their failures to strengthen my position. I'm not passively resisting but aggressively pursuing complete elimination of foreign interference from Burkina Faso. This offensive posture keeps them reactive and prevents them from regaining initiative. I'm surviving their attacks through combination of preparation, capability, and determination. Proper security detects threats. Competent intelligence services expose plots. Vigilant personnel prevent execution. International cooperation provides additional protection. But ultimately, survival requires determination to continue despite danger. This determination comes from understanding that the cause justifies the risk and that surrender is worse than death. I'm winning this war for sovereignty through accumulation of tactical victories that produce strategic transformation. Each exposed intelligence operation weakens their position. Each survived assassination attempt strengthens mine. Each day of maintained independence makes reversal harder. Each example of successful resistance inspires others. The war is far from over, but momentum favors those defending sovereignty over those trying to maintain control. The struggle for African independence will continue regardless of individual fates because it reflects fundamental interests and historical forces. African development requires sovereignty. African dignity demands independence. African potential needs freedom from external constraint. These requirements persist regardless of which individuals lead the struggle. The cause is bigger than any person and will outlive all current leaders. Those who stand will be remembered as heroes who chose principle over safety, who defended sovereignty despite threats, who sacrificed personal security for collective welfare. History honors such leaders. Monuments commemorate their courage. Generations celebrate their examples. Their names become symbols of resistance and sources of inspiration. This legacy is earned through difficult choices and sustained commitment. Those who submit will be forgotten as cowards who let fear determine choices, who traded sovereignty for personal safety, who abandoned their duties when threatened. History judges such leaders harshly. Their names become synonyms for betrayal. Their examples serve as warnings rather than inspiration. They're remembered only as obstacles to progress that had to be overcome. This legacy results from choosing comfort over courage. I'm exposing their third attempt, which came from pure desperation. Intercepted communications showed their frustration and determination. They had failed twice. Their reputation suffered damage. Their African operations were collapsing. They needed me eliminated regardless of cost or risk. They deployed a specialized assassination team professionals with successful operations across multiple continents. The desperation in their communications was palpable and revealing. Intelligence professionals typically maintain operational discipline and emotional control in their messages, even when using encrypted channels. But the intercepts we obtained showed frustration, anger, and determination that bordered on obsession. They weren't just planning another operation, they were fixated on eliminating me specifically because my continued survival represented their failure and threatened their broader objectives. Their frustration stemmed from multiple sources that compounded each other. The first assassination attempt had failed due to detection before execution, exposing their operative and forcing his expulsion. This failure was embarrassing but could be attributed to bad luck or exceptional vigilance. The second attempt had failed more spectacularly, not only detected but turned against them, resulting in captured operatives and seized evidence. This pattern of failure suggested systematic problems with their approach and capabilities. Each failure made the next attempt more difficult because we learned from each encounter while they lost assets and advantages. Their reputation suffered damage that extended beyond the immediate operational context. Mossad's mystique depends partly on perceived invincibility, the idea that they never fail, that their targets inevitably die, that resistance is futile. My survival through 2 attempts challenged this perception. Other intelligence services noted their failures. Potential targets gained confidence that Mossad could be defeated. Allies questioned whether Mossad remained as effective as its reputation suggested. This reputational damage had strategic implications beyond the immediate situation in Burkina Faso. Their African operations were collapsing because my example inspired other nations to scrutinize foreign intelligence presence more carefully. Leaders who had previously tolerated or ignored foreign operatives began asking harder questions. Security services that had accommodated foreign intelligence activities started investigating them. The exposure of assassination attempts against me created continent-wide awareness of how far Western powers would go to maintain control. This awakening threatened intelligence networks across multiple countries, not just in Burkina Faso. They needed me eliminated regardless of cost or risk because allowing me to continue surviving and leading represented an unacceptable outcome. Each day I remained alive and in power demonstrated that African leaders could successfully resist Western intelligence services. Each speech I gave challenging foreign interference inspired others. Each policy I implemented prioritizing sovereignty over accommodation set precedents others might follow. From their perspective, eliminating me had become essential to preventing the complete collapse of their African control systems. The specialized assassination team they deployed represented a significant escalation in resources and capabilities committed to this operation. These weren't ordinary operatives with standard training, they were elite professionals selected specifically for high-value, high-difficulty targets. Their track record included successful eliminations across multiple continents in various operational environments. They had defeated sophisticated security arrangements before. They had adapted to different cultural contexts and political situations. They represented the absolute best capabilities Mossad could deploy for this mission. The team's professional credentials were impressive and intimidating. Members had conducted operations in Europe, eliminating targets protected by advanced security services. They had worked in the Middle East, navigating complex political and security environments. They had operated in Latin America, adapting to different languages and cultures. They had succeeded in Asia, overcoming unfamiliar operational contexts. This global experience meant they brought lessons learned from dozens of operations and could adapt quickly to whatever challenges they encountered in Burkina Faso. Their successful operations across multiple continents demonstrated versatility and adaptability that made them particularly dangerous. They weren't specialists in one method or environment, they were generalists capable of employing whatever approach circumstances required. They could conduct close-quarters operations or long-range attacks. They could work in urban environments or rural settings. They could adapt to different security postures and threat levels. This flexibility meant we couldn't predict their exact approach based on previous patterns. The decision to deploy such a specialized team indicated how seriously they took this mission and how determined they were to succeed despite previous failures. Specialized teams are expensive to maintain and risky to deploy. Using them reveals capabilities and methods that intelligence services prefer to keep secret. Deploying them acknowledges that standard approaches have failed and that extraordinary measures are necessary. The commitment of these resources showed that eliminating me had become a priority that justified accepting greater costs and risks than normal operations would warrant.